I'm Erik Sowa. I've been attending this conference since 2010.
And I'm Noel Vega, and I've been attending this conference since 2022.
We're glad to be here, and thank you to the organizers for the opportunity, and thank you to all of you for your kind attention. We're excited to talk to you about our work at Salesforce, where we help leaders and teams deliver more value sooner with higher quality. The frame for our talk is the executive briefing. When customers ask us how development and delivery work in our shop, we deliver a customized briefing from our Salesforce Innovation Center. Now, I want to nerd out on Kanban with you, said no senior executive ever, at least not to start. So this talk is not aimed at Kanban nerds like all of us here, but for leaders who want to improve their organization and their performance. You may take away some tips and techniques for engaging with your leaders. But first, something that we do with all these is we have to do the forward-looking statement. And we're a publicly traded company. Please make your buying decisions only on the products commercially available from Salesforce. And the reason why this is really interesting in the context of this talk is one of the reasons why we say it this way is because our releases always come out on the same day every time, and what's in them is fungible. If something's not ready to ship, we'll wait until the next release to ship it. So don't buy on futures. Our agile methodology is kind of informing why this forward-looking statement is important. So a little bit about us. I'm currently a coach at Salesforce. I work with the mobile cloud, the collection of teams that build our phone apps and iPad apps. And I love this community. I've been coming to this conference every year since 2010. When I started coming in here, I was an engineering leader. And about halfway through that time, I switched roles to coaching and pursued my AKC credential. This community and this conference have been very good for my career and my network. When we conceived of this talk for the 2020 conference, it would have been my 11th year in a row. And I asked my colleague Noel to come with me and share in the experience and become part of this community. At the time, he was coaching in another part of our organization, and we really enjoyed nerding out on Kanban together.
But then the pandemic happened, time passed, things changed as tended to happen during the pandemic, and now I'm in a different role. In my new role, I lead business operations and strategy for our technology services organization, which oversees our doc writers, our learning and culture team, and our agile coaches.
So his boss is my boss. So Noel is more than a colleague to me now. He represents one of my internal clients, which makes our talk even more interesting than what we would have delivered in 2020, because he can play the role of customer and I can play the role of consultant. And he also has some good non-software examples of flow. We always customize our Salesforce Innovation Center briefings to meet the needs of our specific audience. And it's been a pleasure to customize it for this community. And for that reason, we're going to use simple concepts from the Kanban maturity model throughout. So let's get this journey started. Fire up the Wayback Machine and put yourself in the mid-2000s decade. Salesforce is a young and growing company, and growth brings challenges.
So imagine this. You heard about our big conference, Dreamforce, every fall in San Francisco. You're all excited. You book your tickets. You fly out to San Francisco. You're getting up early. You go to the keynote. You get a great seat right up front. And here comes Mark Benioff. He gets on the stage. Thanks, everyone. See you next year. That's it. Says nothing. He got no new products, no new service announcements, basically no innovations, nothing. Because as a company, we had not produced anything production ready in over a year, which sounds crazy. It sounds unbelievable. But a decade ago, that's exactly where we were.
So we had to find an answer. And that answer was agile. So rapid growth led to success, which also caused a number of customers to greatly increase, creating a, I think I bounced the slide. No, I didn't. Created a need to hire more engineers and build multiple products. And this success, unfortunately, brought a few unplanned hurdles. Customers weren't always happy, salespeople weren't happy, and engineers weren't happy. Communication became much more difficult. We were no longer in the same office. You couldn't get up and walk over to your neighbor to solve a problem. This caused delays in conversation and miscommunication in that it was written and relayed versus face-to-face. We no longer had the visibility of what everybody was doing or a way to monitor progress towards a release. There were many competing priorities and dependencies across many teams. And that ultimately resulted in an unpredictable release schedule. We slipped multiple releases. The release kept getting more and more complicated, and with every delay, people tried to shove more code into it, and that's where we got to the 15 months where we didn't ship anything.
So the days between releases increased while the number of features in every release decreased, which is not a very good combination for success. And as we mentioned, we got to 2006, and we hit a point where we had 15 months without delivering a single feature. So of course, customers are not happy, right? They've got this product that's becoming stale. There's nothing new going into it. They've got all these things they want to see that they're not going to get to see. Sales folks are unhappy because they've got nothing new to sell, so now they're not hitting their quotas. Engineers are unhappy because they're spending all this time on things that aren't actually getting out to production. So of course, morale's down, happiness is down. This was our year of living dangerously. We had a big, big problem, and we needed a solution.
We'll be using evolution as a metaphor in this talk, and the concept of punctuated equilibrium is relevant. You may be familiar with the story of how a meteor impact killed off the dinosaurs. That punctuation point was an extinction-level event for dinosaurs that opened up the planet for the evolution of mammals. We would like to avoid extinction events in business. The inability to ship could be viewed as an imminent extinction event. It was time to take big steps in the evolution of Salesforce. My colleague, Steve Green, with whom I'd worked before at a previous company, happened to be leading the initial transformation at Salesforce, and I recall seeing him give presentations that he called the Year of Living Dangerously. Now, I couldn't find a copy of Steve's early presentations, but I do have the related Stanford paper at hand, and you can see here in the description the pain and agony that was going on here. The pace of release of new software features, a key measure of value for our customers, had slowed from 4 times per year to once per year, and it was taking even longer than that. Morale was suffering across the organization. People were quitting. We had an infrastructure outage that made customers even more unhappy during the critical pre-holiday period, and another outage right after that. So we were really very close to being extinct here. It really eroded trust in the reliability of Salesforce services. And it seemed like it was time to take drastic measures. So we'll jump back to the main story there. Being agile now allows us to be highly predictable. You can see in this graph here that there's no variability in the days between major releases. That's because we scheduled the dates for the releases many years in advance. But we don't know exactly what's going in them. We can guarantee you that they'll happen. You can guarantee that the features and services that are ready to be launched are of the highest quality, or they won't make it into the release. So innovation is the key to what we do. We moved to doing 3 public-facing releases a year with seamless automatic updates for all of our customers. And features are sourced from a close relationship with our customers. We listen to them and build the things that they need for them to be successful. And since Salesforce is a complex customer success platform, 3 predictable release timeframes a year allows our customers to plan and build their customizations on top of the platform with high quality for their end users. This is a kind of a fitness criteria for a platform company like us. So in hindsight, a primary effect of this work was to unblock the flow of releases. Flow is a key concept in Kanban, and in the maturity model, it appears at level 2. We'll talk more about the KMM soon, but for now, I just want you to notice that this transition unlocked flow and established a regular cadence of delivery, which was super important to the evolution of Salesforce as a business. Lead time and timely predictable delivery are almost always customer fitness criteria. And a specific form of consistency here is the use of cadence to provide regular, predictable events. We're almost ready for an audience participation number here. The concept of flow has now made it into our product marketing message. You may have heard that Slack is now a Salesforce company. And this slogan, when work flows, customer success grows, appears prominently on Slack's website. So flow is in our marketing messages. That's pretty great. It's a powerful marketing message. Now, I'd like you to think about the blockers and impediments to flow in your work. What benefits would be unlocked by removing those blockers? What would you tell your leaders they could get by attending to flow? Second example to stimulate your thinking. When the work flows, developer happiness grows. Anybody else have anything? When the work flows, what happens? What grows?
Money grows.
Money grows. The business grows. Trust grows. Innovation. When nothing's flowing, none of these things can grow. And when the work flows, all of these things can grow. So those are great examples. And now let's return to the executive briefing. Recall that we found ourselves in a situation with inconsistent processes that relied on heroic individual effort. I called out earlier that unblocking flow made level 2 accessible. We moved from an emergent, inconsistent release process to a defined release process followed consistently. This is much better, but still relies on managers who are constantly monitoring work and approving changes. We need to address that problem to scale as we continue growing. But before we address that problem, let's dig a little deeper into what we call Agile at Salesforce.
So at Salesforce, there are 3 pillars to our Agile implementation. We have principles, values, and practices. And to us, you can't have one without the others. We need all 3. All of this is surrounded by a psychologically safe environment. We want our teams to be able to speak up, to tell us what they need, to be able to make the decisions for themselves without any fear. Basically, the practices are simple. I think everybody in this room would understand, practices behind Agile, but that's nothing without the values and the principles behind them. You can just do Agile and get some value, but if you really want to make a change, we have to become Agile. So as coaches, we're going in and we're really emphasizing those values or emphasizing the principles behind it. But it's not just the values of Agile, it's the values of the company that are driving us. So we're going to go into, in a moment, a piece of what we call our V2MOM exercise. I believe Mark Benioff has written a book about our V2MOM planning. It's vision, values, methods, obstacles, and measures. And the idea is it starts at the top and everybody aligns to that. You'll notice that values were right there at the top. You have vision and then values before anything else. So we want to be led by our values. So I would encourage you to think about the values and principles in your company. If you have them explicitly stated, do they guide you? Are they a foundation upon which your company is built? So our values for FY23 are here. The first 4 have been pretty constant. We've actually added a 5th, and I'll get to that in a moment. Trust has been our #1 value for probably longer than I can remember. It's become a kind of a thing internally to always talk about trust as #1, and everything that we do has to have trust built in. What does that mean? Well, we're a cloud company, right? If you're going to give us our data, it had better be reliable, it had better be secure, it better be available and highly performant. Right? Because when we first came up with Salesforce, we were saying, put our data here instead of some app locally. Right? Well, imagine if it just disappeared, you wouldn't want to use us. So trust is huge, but it's more than just customers trusting our product. We trust our teams. We want our communities to trust in us. We want transparency in what we're doing. We want to lead with ethics and integrity, so you trust the Salesforce name. Right? It's not just a product. In fact, we're proud to have been named one of the most ethical companies by Ethisphere 13 times because we believe in you trusting us and us earning that trust. Right behind that, pretty much parallel to that, customer success. Right? Your success is our success. Your customer's success is your success, which is our success. Right? We want to help you enable your customers. Without that, we don't exist. Innovation. If you think about successful companies, you have to continue to innovate. Other companies are hungry to catch up, right? Customers want more things. If you don't keep that innovation up, just like in 2006 when we couldn't put new products out, you're going to suffer. But it's not just our product, right? I mentioned earlier about trust, and part of that is we believe in doing well by doing good. And for us, that starts with equality. We advocate for equality in our communities. We advocate for equality in the workplace. In fact, we fund equality resource groups, basically employee groups that come in and try to advocate for equality for the groups that they represent. For example, I'm co-lead of a resource group called Latino Force Indy, which is a local hub of our Latino Force Global group that goes into the community and advocates for equality and advocates for Latino representation in technology, which if you know anything about Latino representation in technology, there isn't enough of it, right? We want to help change that. And then along the same lines, this year we've added sustainability. We believe in making a difference in our climate, in our world. So we've become a net zero company. We want to help the world achieve net zero. We want to help impact the world and help impact the climate change situation. Mark Benioff's gone in with his 1T.org, our Trillion Trees initiative. We've also created the Net Zero Cloud, which is a product that helps other companies achieve net zero. So for us, we're led by our values, and we try to, basically all our decisions are around our values.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that sustainability also applies to our development practices. We want to have, we don't want to burn out our people. We want to be able to keep on doing this over and over again. We're in our third decade of existence right now, so it's time to think about sustainability for the company. So we can see how the values, principles, and practices line up here. The core values, we talk about the lean principles and the agile practices, and you'll see in a minute why I'm emphasizing that here. Now we're ready to take a deeper dive and bring in more concepts from the Kanban maturity model. Is Agile at Salesforce congruent with KMM? What guidance would be helpful for moving forward? Now you all know about these principles of the Kanban method. Change management experts recognize the value of meeting their clients where they are, and the Kanban method of this is represented by these principles. I'm a physicist by training. I'm using evolution as a metaphor here, biology, and that's because change is a social process. And you may be wondering how a big bang agile transformation like what we just described matches with this incremental evolutionary change guidance. Well, the big bang is not ideal, but it's better than extinction. So going forward, we want to do the more incremental evolutionary change to avoid getting into situations like the year of living dangerously. So let's see how that works. Here is one of my favorite mantras from Kanban maturity model: outcomes follow practices, practices follow culture, culture follows values, so therefore lead with values. And that's something that you can see in the slide that I showed before. The only difference is that we talked about principles instead of culture, but it's very similar. And have you ever tried to persuade somebody to adopt new practices because they're better? That doesn't work out so well. We'll model that with some role playing a little later in this talk. But for now, let's stipulate to this progression here on the slide. We can see that the advice of lead with values is embedded in the Agile at Salesforce briefing that we've been going through with you here. So these values are a huge influence on our culture. So revisiting the previous slide, you can sort of see the congruence with the KMM mantra there, with the insight that culture and principles both represent how we live. We can observe a virtuous cycle. We know that the values tend to remain constant or very slowly over time, but culture or principles, practices, and outcomes can improve over time, and they can and they should. And the key insight here is that it's a loop. It's not just a line like we had in our executive briefing. It's a loop that you can go around and turn it into a flywheel that improves your outcomes. What we can do and what we can achieve comes out of how we do things. And what we achieve can affect how we live. It can evolve our culture. And I'll have an example of going around this loop and pursuing incremental evolutionary change and unlocking some new opportunities for our leaders to do great things. So too big of a change all at once is not feasible. So instead, we assess where we are and look for the next reachable step. And that's where the maturity model comes in. There's way too much detail in the full maturity model for a talk like this. But the organizational maturity model view will serve our purpose here. And you've all seen this poster with the 6 levels of organizational maturity using the pizza business as an example. You can't go from level 0 to level 3 in one leap, but you can go from level 0 to level 1, consolidate your gains, and then go from 1 to 2, et cetera. And I'm going to dig into this a little here and point out that how this applied to our initial transformation. Now, of course, the K-men didn't exist at that time, but this retrospective analysis will help us look forward in a minute here. So recall that we found ourselves in a situation with inconsistent processes that rely on individual effort. That's over here in the team-focused level 1 area. And I called out that unblocking flow made level 2 accessible. That's over here in customer-driven. But it does depend on the main cook or the manager to make sure that the defined procedures are now followed consistently. This is much better, but still relies on managers monitoring the work and approving changes all the time, constantly. It's an impediment to scaling for them to have to focus on that. So we need to figure out a way to get to level 3 to have always happy customers where the service is consistent and the teams know what to do and the managers can work on the system to make it better. Simplifying this even further, the cultural forms on this simple graphic are a pretty good tell for what was going on. Before the initial transformation, we were already team-focused but relied on individual heroics to resolve dependencies across teams. You could get up from your chair, walk over to a nearby desk, and influence your colleagues directly. Growth made it much harder for individual heroics like this to be effective, and the initial transformation was a reflection of becoming more customer-driven per the values. Restoring a consistent delivery cadence shifted the required heroics from individual contributors working individual problems to managers working on the system. And my clients certainly light up when I call out managerial heroics. Their work-life balance and the quality of their decisions would be greatly improved by reducing the demand for their heroics by getting to level 3, which is all about aligning behind customer purpose. The evolutionary metaphor is fit for purpose, and the purpose is customer success. Although we do have examples of higher level forms across our company, most of my work is around helping my clients become more fit for purpose and less dependent on managerial heroics. Now let's jump back to the executive briefing material.
So after all of that, well, honestly, when we created this slide, we were at about 1,000 or so teams. I've checked recently, we're at about 1,500, closing on 2,000 teams across technology. Before the pandemic, like many of you, most of our teams, if not all of them, were co-located. Things, of course, have changed, much as this very conference knows all about in the last couple of years, so we've had to adjust. It was a punctuation point with how we work. And so Salesforce has put out our Success from Anywhere initiative, which, long story short, so long as the teams are producing, getting things done, it's up to them. It's up to them where they produce, what times they produce, how they operate. And that kind of models the way Agile at Salesforce has been coaching our teams. We give them the principles, we give them the basics behind Scrum, Kanban. We want them to pick what works for them, so long as they have the principles and the values in mind. So in the end, we have about 70% or so of our teams using Scrum, mostly product teams, mostly development teams. A lot of them were familiar with Scrum originally. 25% or so are purely Kanban teams, and 5% are some others, and a lot of those are infrastructure and operations teams. But I've coached some of those infrastructure teams, and some of them, Scrum's better for them, Kanban's better for them. As far as we're concerned, so long as you're doing the things for the right reasons, pick whatever works for you.
You've just heard how we tell our customers about how the work gets done. You've seen content we use in external executive briefings in our Salesforce Innovation Center, but now I'm going to turn to some content I use internally in a significant change initiative. You'll get an insider view of how it works in product development here at Salesforce. So let's see an example of thinking big but taking small steps to start. No big bangs. I'm a big fan of the pragmatic, actionable, evidence-based guidance in the Kanban method and maturity model. And as an AKC, I use this guidance every day, whether I talk about it explicitly or not. I'm going to tell you about how some of my work using Kanban, and I'm going to explain the steps that I took. So now we're going to start with the role play I foreshadowed earlier. And warning, there's going to be some trigger words coming here.
So Erik, what did you learn from observing my teams?
Well, I just finished my assessment tour, Noel, and your teams are using a whole basket full of deplorable engineering practices. They're clinging to their ways of working and their bad habits. I know just how to fix this. We'll put a red badge of shame on every team's profile, and everyone involved will wear a scarlet number until they turn themselves green by reforming. How does that make you feel?
Get out.
Yeah, that doesn't work. You're doing it wrong invokes emotional resistance. Being judged or assessed by outsiders is often perceived as a threat to the group and to the individual identity. And the group will take steps to protect its identity, starting by rejecting the judgment and the remediation recommendations. We've all seen this pattern many times. There's plenty of evidence outside these walls here that people make choices against their rational self-interest when their identity is threatened. So let's not repeat this pattern here. There's a better way to foster change. Managers play a crucial role, and change is a social process. Leadership is not about telling people how to do their job. It's modeling the values and behavior to evolve the culture and get better outcomes. And if maturity models are roadmaps for managed evolution, then leadership is the trail guide for that journey. As we guide our organization along the trail, we strive to avoid the two failure modes: complacency, stopping too soon at a false plateau, and overreaching, wanting to change everything all at once. Instead, the leaders light up the next bit of trail right in front of where we are today. The formula for step-by-step evolutionary change is this: stressor plus reflection mechanism plus leadership. It's all right here on our favorite cartoon. Just enough stress avoids the trap of complacency. The visualization of work in progress is the reflector here, and the active leadership is the call to action over on the right. So now we're ready to appreciate my story of rapid release at massive scale in the mobile cloud. Now, I remember the first retrospective I facilitated when I came into this assignment. An entire release worth of feature work was canceled. You can imagine the morale issues that came up in that retrospective. Using John Cutler's Think Big, Work Small graphic, it's clear that we're right here in column 3. We had done the work of breaking up a big release plan into small chunks, but there was no way to tell where you were until the end of that 4-month cycle. There wasn't a short enough feedback loop, and it was a slog and an eternal burn down. Flow was blocked, and the work didn't ship, which should remind you of a smaller scale version of the original transformation problem we talked about earlier. As I was seeking to understand that already stressful situation, senior leader in the company challenged my client. And that was the additional stressor I needed to engage with him to begin that evolutionary change process. He came back from a meeting with our technology leader and told me this.
Erik, our president read a Facebook blog about rapid release at massive scale and challenged me to do something like that. I have no idea how to do that at Salesforce.
Oh, I think I can help you with that. We can make our code lines shippable at any time. So we value trust and customer success, and our culture demanded that we restore flow to live those values. We realized that we needed to ship smaller batches more often to make our work flow to the customer and to learn at a more rapid pace than the 4-month release cycle that in 2006 seemed like fresh. In 2017, it was not so fresh. So how did we decide? It wasn't by a big bang identity-threatening change. In fact, it took 3 years, incremental step-by-step process. And a fun part of that story is for the middle part of those 3 years, I stepped out and worked with another team, but they kept improving when I wasn't in the room with them. And then when I came back, they had finished the journey without me, which I thought was pretty cool.
You coach yourself out of a job.
Yeah, I coached myself out of a job, but then they wanted me back. So, this is great advice. Give your job away; they'll make more if you do that. So we started with influencing the desire to change, but change is hard, and it's a social process, and it's people are more likely to change to gain or keep something they value, not because they were doing it wrong. So let's try the thing that failed a different way. This is a slide that I used in our internal deck, getting the teams ready to do this work together. I took 3 relevant persona, a product manager, a customer, and developers, and painted the picture of what it would be like 3 years later where they were able to solve the problems that were facing them today, and how happy they were going to be when they were able to ship more continuously. The product manager could support all of Apple's new device features and mission-critical capabilities in production on the same day that Apple launched it. The customer could get on the phone and say, hey, my mission-critical application isn't working, and we could diagnose and fix it right there on the phone with them, which would also make the developer happy, because nobody likes to be on one of those calls where the customer is complaining and they can't fix it for them. So those are the kind of things that my clients valued, and they could see that if we could get from where we were, the painful place, to the happy zone there, that it would probably be worth the effort. And storytelling matters in social processes, and we can express a future narrative by putting all those values together into a short vision statement, which tells the story of what we could do. I talked about lighting up the trail, and this is how we did it. We're going to do this together. The mobile cloud can exploit emerging market opportunities and address developing threats with an industry-leading SLA and a developer experience that attracts the best and brightest talent, engineers who delight in focusing on delivering value. This really helped unlock the willingness to go through the transformation. Now, Kanban and Salesforce both call for leading with values, and these are the values I amplified in this call to action. Trust, make safety a prerequisite, protect from mistakes. Mistakes and rework are death to predictability and death to customer satisfaction. We want to fix problems before customers encounter them so we can keep on adding more stuff to our service. Make customers awesome. We can deliver value continuously by a combination of people, product, and infrastructure. The development team is responsible for everything: quality, operability, security, not just coding the features and fixes. And the architecture can evolve over time to protect the most important characteristics. That enables us to have a really great SLA for making changes to production in a volatile market. And finally, making developers awesome. Our engineers should enjoy a low-friction, high-productivity working experience. They should be able to experiment and learn rapidly and focus on delivering world-class services. Engineers need to be able to decide when to roll code. Product managers need to decide when to release features, and those things are actually orthogonal. We figured out a way to do that. So how did it turn out? Some 3 years later, we can tell the story of what we have done through this change process. So coming back to finish the slide, we found and removed a lot of obstacles on that path. That's why it took so long. We adjusted our engineering practices, especially attention to definition of done, towards meeting that goal. And we found the extra discipline and rigor it takes to keep meeting that goal sprint after sprint or release after release. The benefits go well beyond fewer bugs. The same technology we use to detect bugs before we ship can be used to monitor production health and help us address availability issues before customers report them. And we've unlocked business agility by enabling our product managers to run safe experiments and tests in production, which didn't happen before we could do these fast release cycles. So great engineers working confidently in a safety-first ecosystem can achieve amazing results. And this holiday note from our leadership team calls it out.
So on behalf of the executive team, we want to take a moment to thank you for all the incredible work you've accomplished this past year. We're delivering more value to our customers sooner, and the pace and quality of our releases has never been better.
So shout out to everybody who's talked this at the conference this week about language. One of my favorite language tricks is to use the word sooner every time where other people use the word faster. And I got my executive to start saying sooner instead of faster, which is a pretty huge accomplishment in my world. So it's important to notice that all of those words in bold, more value, sooner, and pace and quality, they're all measurable. We have the data to prove this. So he wasn't just talking because he was happy. He had the data to prove it. So engineers deliver value to customer by changing production systems. It's our biggest lever. It's also our biggest risk. We could break customers, confuse them, violate data sharing boundaries, and bloat our applications with features that customers don't use. So it's really important to have discipline around this. The work was also recognized org-wide. We're proud to share that our teams won an internal award for delivering customer success. Now, I know how we all feel about best practices in this community, but this was a corporate program, and we got the award. By shifting left to shorten the feedback loop, we were able to find issues early, before we ship, and deliver sustained value, their sustainability, to our customers release after release. The earlier focus on quality and performance has also led us to increase the amount of instrumentation, which helps us monitor production health. What's more, safety breeds confidence, breeds innovation. I talked about the flywheel effect before, going around that virtuous cycle loop here. And our growing confidence to take measured risks enables product and engineering to collaborate in new and meaningful ways. This was not within our reach when people were suffering in the era where we were having trouble shipping or had quality problems. But now that we can ship confidently and safely, it opened up the ability to do experiments in production. So imagine that Noel here is now my VP of products, and I can say, hey, Noel, after our 24-hour hackathon, we have 20 new production-ready features that you could put into production, and you could do experiments with them to figure out which of those features that you actually want to turn on for customers. How do you feel about that?
That's wonderful. Looks like improving the developer experience is going to improve our customer experience real soon now.
That's exactly what we did. So now we can do experiments in production. And what that does here, I'm going to return to the John Cutler graphic. This was the one over on the right of that. Think big, work small to learn fast. Because inside the loop here, we are trying and doing experiments and figuring out what actually works. So our CTO likes to use the phrase trusted agility here. And trusted agility is how we live and how we do things. It unlocks amazing capabilities and achievements. So summing it all up, together we are learning to deliver more value sooner with higher quality. Safety and confidence together encourage us to think and dream big, and the progressive delivery helps us to start small and learn fast. So now I'm going to hand it over to Noel to talk a little bit about his new role and how Kanban and Agile helps in business processes.
And I'll shift away from being the generic Salesforce executive, finally. So as it happens, you can take the coach out of the Agile, but you can't take the Agile out of the coach. And as I got to this new role, what I came to find real quick is that a lot of what I had been doing previously was very much applicable in the new role. So in this role, I manage, as I mentioned earlier, business operations for our technology services group. So that's things like budget and recruiting, purchasing, planning, things of that nature. And I was speaking with a prior colleague about this, and he had said that he thought I'd hate not doing systems. Now, before that, I was coaching a lot of infrastructure teams for Marketing Cloud, for Commerce Cloud, for our Hyperforce product. So I was working quite a bit with systems teams. And really what I came to realize is there may not be code there, but these are still systems. Each of these are a business system, and a lot of the same rules apply. You don't need to have a software system to have something that needs improvement. And so what I decided to do was take kind of a Kanban lens, because again, you can't take the Agile out of the coach. So one example here, one of the first things I looked at was our recruiting situation. And being the first in a role, this was something that, well, nobody else had recognized as a system, but we did know that we were having trouble filling seats in a timely fashion. Well, why is that? It'd be very easy to come in and assume it's this or assume it's that, but what I decided was, let's take that Kanban lens. Let's start with what you do now. What is out there? What is the current process? Is it documented anywhere? Is there reporting anywhere? Do we have metrics? As it turns out, we didn't have a lot of these things, but we had enough to know that we weren't filling seats quite fast enough. We knew who the resources were. We kind of knew what the process was, but we didn't have metrics to see where the process was broken. And so we're going to agree to incremental evolutionary change, because I can't very well say, you know what, we're just going to stop recruiting and not fill seats, right? That's not going to work for the business, right? I can't just say, give me 3 months, I'm going to have a whole new process, we'll get back to it then. It's not going to fly. So what we decided was, let's improve our monitoring, let's improve our data, let's see where our bottlenecks are, what's going on, and what small changes can we make along the way to make this better. And so we started by improving our reporting. We were able to see, for example, that it was taking our hiring managers some time to request a recruiter, and at the same time, there were a lot of common recs that were being filled across the company, across our geographic spread, that really could have been shared pipelines. So like a doc writer in San Francisco and a doc writer in Indianapolis, well, now that we're kind of remote friendly, maybe we can share those pipelines. Or maybe 3 managers are all looking for a doc writer in the same location. They don't know that, so the recruiters have 3 different pipelines. We don't need that, right? We have one big pipeline and a bunch of good candidates. We can fill them at the same time and fill those seats faster. The wholesale changes, those can wait. In a business setting, you've probably all had a situation where you wanted to say, wow, that other team is terrible. They don't know what they're doing. They're holding us up all the time. And it's very easy, and it's very tempting to say that. And I can't say that I may not have muttered that once or twice at my desk. But eventually you have to realize, look, these things are in place for reasons. You may not have been around for those reasons, right? There are other challenges that were solved. Folks don't like red tape, right? Folks don't like holding things up. They don't like things taking forever. So rather than go in and start throwing blame around, look, our hiring managers and our recruiters, they don't have time for blame, right? They don't have time for change for the change's sake. Our hiring managers have day jobs, other things they have to do. The recruiters are working hard to fill head count all over the place. So let's assume positive intent. Let's put all the blame aside, right? And let's improve. Now, if something's working, we're going to go ahead and leave it alone. In fact, support it. It may not be processed, but let's leave it alone. That gets to our next point, which is we want to encourage acts of leadership at all levels. I'm one person with, I think, well, a mic right there, apparently, a dozen or so different operations to look at. I can't possibly shepherd every single recruiter out there. I need help. I need help knowing what's going on. I need to empower others to raise concerns. But there are situations where you even have hiring managers that have relationships with recruiters locally, and they, rather than going through a process, they just kind of tap them on the shoulder, hey, I've got a rec, okay, cool. Now I could say, hey, that's not process, don't do that. Or I can say, you know what, that fills a head count faster, go ahead, have fun. And we prefer the latter, right? It works for them. I'm not gonna break what's working for the sake of breaking it, right? We wanna empower all of that. We wanna empower improvement. We wanna learn from other orgs. They may have reporting or processes that work for them. Let's borrow those, rather than say, oh, that's weird. What lessons can we learn and apply internally to our processes? And so, the results, a year later, our recruiter request process is a lot more frictionless. It's smooth like butter, basically. We are to the point where we get recruiters assigned within 48 to 72 hours consistently, rather than as long as like a month before. And our org size, I believe the stat was something like 20% bigger in the last year. It was pretty considerable that we grew. We're able to do that because now headcount's filling faster. It's flowing, right? When the recruiting flows, the headcount grows.
Yeah, there you go. And you eliminate a lot of wait states in the recruiting process there, so that you could hire qualified candidates sooner.
Yeah, yes, we did. We definitely did. And there are other examples like that, but what I also came to realize, being that you can't take the agile out of the coach, is that I had a lot on my plate. My manager works basically across all of TNP. She's the COO of technology for Salesforce, so she needs help with things. So there's a lot going on. She's passed me things here. I've got to look at this over there. I need to kind of get control of things. And so kind of a little bit of personal agile in play. For me, I kind of gravitated, and hopefully don't get booed here, but I set up kind of 1-week sprints and a bit of a personal scrum, only because I needed focus. I needed to say, for this week, I'm going to look at budget. Next week, I'll look at this. This week, I'll look at that. And with all the pass downs and things going on, it'd be too easy to interject this and interject that. So this was a forcing function. But as far as I'm concerned, this goes back to what we said earlier. That's just the practices, right? The values and principles, stay focused. How do we improve incrementally, right? How do we empower our teams? So for me, I've got a 1-week sprint. I've got a backlog of things. The sprint ends right before my weekly one-on-one with my manager, so it serves kind of like a sprint review. I can say, this is what I'm working on, this is what I've run into, this is what's next. And then I'm running retros for myself, which sounds weird, right? But at the same time, I can actually kind of brain dump all the things that are happening, see common threads, and improve things, right? There are a lot of operations to work on. It's very easy to forget that one thing and miss a pattern. It works because it's incremental for me. There's so much going on that for me, being able to take that small little step gets us closer to where we want to be. Erik, to bring it home?
Yeah, we're near the end of our journey here, and you didn't see any Kanban boards or any fancy metrics charts or anything like that, because we spend a lot of our time talking to executives who don't want to see that stuff, but underneath, we're doing all that stuff, so you could ask us questions about that if you're curious. But I want to sum up the entire presentation in one slide. Where do you want to go? Well, it's business, so of course we want to go up and to the right. And when do you want to get there? You want to get there sooner. So evolutionary change works for us in many contexts. We manage flow to learn fast and achieve fitness for purpose sooner. We let it flow to let it grow and yield the great results that you and your customers desire and deserve. With that, I want to thank you all for your kind attention. We know your time is valuable, and we really appreciate that you chose to spend it with us, and we're happy to take questions now.
Oh, we have microphones over here. Yeah, I think we do. Figure out how to turn it on. Nope. Oh, there it is.
Testing?
Very cool presentation. It was an awesome example of smart stuff, modern agile, product stuff. Anyway, the question, how do you measure value? How do you get it sooner? How do you
Measure value, and how do we?
We'll just repeat the questions.
Yeah.
Sure.
So Matt's question was, how do we measure value, and how do we get it sooner? And of course, in some sense, value is what our customers care about. So if we have a customer who needs a critical feature, I've been involved with our mobile offline program, with customers who need to go into places where the cell network doesn't reach and do work and then come back and sync up when they get back into range. And if we can't deliver that, then we haven't delivered value. So it's about satisfying the requests that our customers have in the priority order that our product managers have decided. And of course, sooner is about measuring lead time. When we switched from 4-month release cycles to 2-week release cycles in the mobile cloud, we could give customers something in maybe 4 to 6 weeks instead of 6 months.
Do we have any other questions?
Cesar.
You mentioned that product managers should be able to request a release independently of basically always shippable products.
Right. Yeah.
And how often do they exercise that option?
Well, so Cesar asked about product managers being able to decide to release features when we have pretty much continuously shippable code at any time. And so how often do they do that? A lot of the major features we still release on our 3 times a year release cycle, because as I mentioned earlier in the talk, we're a platform and our customers have big customizations on top of them. And if we released new stuff all the time, they would start to object and say we can't test our customizations in time. So for major features, we typically hold off until the 3 times a year release cycle. But what we've unlocked is the ability with our early adopter customers who want to beta test things sooner. We can turn those on for them and not turn it on for the customers who are moving more slowly. So what we did was we used essentially feature flags to make that possible. The developers can ship stuff and put it in production and even test it in production, but not expose it to customers who aren't ready for it yet. And the product manager can say, I want you to turn this flag on for this beta customer or for everybody because we're going generally available. And so decoupling the shipping of code from the releasing of features was a huge enabling factor for making that available.
We have time for one more question before we go to anybody else.
Cesar again.
Is a product experiment on production its own class of service, or is it just handled as a feature that flows like the rest of them?
And we're doing it right now as a feature that flows like everything else. And because we run Salesforce on Salesforce, we run our business on the platform. A lot of times where we test our new features first is on our internal orgs. So for the mobile home cards that I mentioned there, we tried them out with our salespeople first, and they told us which ones mattered for them on their day-to-day work.
In fact, our work management is also our dog fooding environment, as well as like 14 other things, change management, release management, all that's handled on an internally grown environment on the Salesforce platform, but we release to that first. So if anybody's gonna feel the pain of a bad integration, we will first.
Yeah, I use the phrase progressive delivery in the talk. There's another longer version where I go into it in great detail, but progressive delivery is you don't turn something on for everybody all at once, because if it's bad, it's a bad day. So we do what you call canaries and staggers. So put it out on a few servers first, see if it's broken, and if it's good, we keep on rolling it out. And a lot of times the first place that we see it are on our internal orgs, so that if we break something, we know about it, but our paying customers don't see it until we're confident that we have it. But we have fewer of those problems now that we ship more often.
Well, we're out of time here today. Thank you, Noel and Erik.
Thank you all.